It's been nearly 12 years since The Last of Us's original release, and in that time it's had 2 remasters, a sequel, a TV show, and the franchise has sold over 37 million copies at the time of recording. It is considered by many to be the preeminent story-driven experience you will find anywhere in gaming. And while it certainly wasn't the first great video game story, it was perhaps the single biggest leap forward in how video game stories are presented that the industry had ever seen. It has won countless Game of the Year awards, and it is one of a very small handful of games that you could call a masterpiece without anybody batting an eye. And it's done all of that while not really being a very interesting story concept in my opinion. Before you race to the comments section, I say that as an outsider who hadn't played the game until very recently, and only really knew the elevator pitch for the story, which never really grabbed me. Zombie up? Okay, I'd obviously heard how incredible it supposedly was, but being an Xbox player most of my life, I'm one of the people who actually watched the show before I played the game. Given how legendary the game's story was supposed to be, I didn't think it'd matter what format I experienced it in. After all, if it is as good as they say, why should it matter? And I was really underwhelmed. Don't get me wrong, it was a good show, it was great even, but a masterpiece? One of the greatest of all time? After everything I had heard about it, all of its success, accolades and achievements, this was it? Maybe the bar had been set too high, maybe it was unfair to go in with such lofty expectations. So I had to play the game, if for no other reason than just to understand, of all things, why The Last of Us? There's something about being on the original hype train for a product that is a huge part of why fans might look back on it so nostalgically, and often getting on board for the first time years later can give it the unreasonable task of living up to the masterpiece status that fans might have given it. And I realised that that's how I'd watched the show. I sat there skeptically with my arms crossed waiting for it to do its masterpiece thing, and in doing that I actively worsened my experience. So going into The Last of Us game, I drastically readjusted my expectations and attitude to account for that. I had no idea in what ways the game would differ from the show, or even if I'd feel any differently by the end, but I at least wanted to give it a fairer shot than I gave the show. And before I get into the main point of the video, I want to just quickly explain just how fast my concerns were put to rest. It was right here. Yep. For me, making Sarah the first playable character I thought was an instant game changer that reminded me just how good gaming can be as a means to tell stories. I fully expected to play as Joel straight out of the gate, and I can't understate how much this subversion of my expectations heightened my investment in the prologue. There's just something about inhabiting a character in a game that establishes a connection to them in a way that only a game can uniquely take advantage of. Because any adversity or challenges that character faces, I will have to overcome. So if you make me a 12-year-old girl in her pajamas who's slow as shit with monsters outside, suffice to say that I as the player feel just as defenseless as she does. I understand how scary and confusing this scenario is for her, and it meant that even when we eventually switched to controlling Joel, I now have the same mindset as he does. I'm not scared for my safety as Joel in this sequence. I'm scared for her, because I've been her. I've felt what she's felt, even if it was only for a few minutes. And as a result of that, while I found the prologue's ending in the show to be well executed and sad, I found the same scene in the game to be absolutely soul-crushing.
Move your hands, babe. I know, baby, I know. God. Listen to me, I know this hurts, baby. You're gonna be okay, baby, stay with me. All right, I'm gonna pick you up. I know, baby, I know it hurts. Come on, baby, please. I know, baby, I know. Sarah. Baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Come on. No. No. No, no, no. Please. Please, please, please don't do this. Please.
It's deeply upsetting. Your child being shot in the stomach and bleeding to death in your arms is about as gruesome of a nightmare a parent could possibly conceive of. And notice Sarah's reaction. It's more than pain in her face and squeals, it's fear. She's terrified terrified of dying, terrified that her dad can't save her. And there's no dramatic wailing or screaming from Joel, he instead whispers. It's a relatively subdued reaction that feels private, like we shouldn't be watching it. Watching an extremely distressed man quietly experience the most traumatic thing that'll likely ever happen to him feels so real and uncomfortable, and the camera never pulls or cuts away. Joel gets no alleviation from the pain he's feeling in that moment, so neither do we. It is devastating to a level that I never felt watching the show, and it's done it in a fraction of the time. Within 15 minutes, it was obvious that I had absolutely nothing to worry about. The prologue was so well done, so perfectly written, performed, and presented that it'd still be enough for me if I hadn't played a second longer. So I was no longer playing the game just to understand why The Last of Us became so revered. I just wanted to talk about why The Last of Us worked for me.
So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.
The rest of the video is just going to be about these two, because I think the main reason the HBO show let me down was just because I didn't fully buy into how Joel and Ellie's relationship developed over the course of the season. So some of the character moments just felt a bit abrupt for me. So when it comes to the game, why The Last of Us worked for me ultimately just comes down to how well the subtle development of this relationship, particularly from Joel's perspective, is executed. And I think that because their developing father-daughter relationship is so foundational to the entire story, the improved presentation of it massively heightened my overall experience. So I'm not going to cover absolutely everything, namely the ending and what I make of it is something I'll probably save for another video, but for now, I just want to talk about this. These are some of the most authentic feeling characters I think I've seen in any piece of media anywhere. They feel like real people that actually exist. And there's a number of reasons for this. First of all, the acting. Not that I didn't think it was good in the show, but I wasn't really prepared for just how good it was going to be here.
No matter what, you keep finding something to fight for. Now, I know that's not what you want to hear right now.
Swear to me. Swear to me that everything that you've said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Just little details like Joel taking a step back from Ellie's sudden and confrontational demand as if she's caught him off balance with it, or even just the minuscule changes in his expression, relaxing his face for a moment in order to sell the lie, but then immediately furrowing his brow again and tensing up to brace for her response. There's even a little bit of guilt and sadness you can see in his expression for lying to her. And every scene in the game is oozing with subtext that is so purposefully laced within the performance and animations like this. Relatively tiny details that might not even be consciously noticed by the player, but still result in characters that feel so tangible and genuine to anyone who spends any amount of time with them.
I hate cliffhangers.
Where did you get that?
Back at Bill's. I mean, all this stuff was just lying there.
What else did you get?
However, I also understand that acting only goes as far as the writing permits, and an enormous part of the authenticity of these characters has to be credited to the writing. I mean, look at just how brilliantly their relationship is slowly developed. Even playing the game again to capture the footage for this video and analysing every scene, scrutinising every detail and interaction between these two characters, I cannot tell you at what point they really started to care about and love one another. It was probably around here that they started to really get along and enjoy each other's company, and by here their relationship was undeniable. So how did we get here? Because there really aren't that many big moments before this in which certain milestones in their relationship are clearly reached. It's much subtler than that. It's all subtext. And so as a result, I kind of just got to a certain point in the story where I kind of just knew that they really cared about each other and had done for a while. I just didn't know when that happened. Which is why I think their relationship is so believably compelling, because in real life, it kind of happens in a similar way. Developing a strong bond in a relationship of any kind isn't the result of one or two grand gestures, but rather the compounding effect of 100 small ones. Little insignificant insignificant nothing moments that wouldn't mean anything by themselves, but together can create a powerful connection, which is why it can often be difficult to describe why you might feel the way you do about a loved one, because you can't really point to any single moment in your life that made you feel that way. But most of the time, relationships in movies, shows, or books are not fully depicted that way because it's a hard thing to pull off in those formats, and it's significantly easier and often more exciting to showcase the more expressive, grander moments of connection, which is why The Last of Us stands out so much in this particular way. It's much quieter than that. I also love that in the game, Joel is the narrative through line for the entire story. He's the main playable character and almost all of the story is seen from his perspective. We never flash back to anyone else's backstory or spend too long with any other character. And ironically, I think the best episode in the show is Bill and Frank's backstory in episode 3, but I love the continuity of just staying with one character throughout the entire playthrough. This is Joel's story and everyone else, including Ellie, just revolves around it. And as a result, I think we get a much more compact and richer unpacking of just what makes him tick.
You mumble in your sleep. I hate bad dreams.
Yeah, me too.
Day one of the apocalypse taught him just how devastating the potential consequences can be of having close relationships in a world this dangerous. So naturally, his traumatized response to that is to just not have any close relationships. But there's a number of pretty obvious issues with that. For a start, human beings are inherently social and collaborative creatures. Having close relationships and communities is embedded in our nature in a way that cannot be helped or changed. So deliberately attempting to shield yourself from that is to deny a critical part of your humanity. And unless you're a psychopath, which Joel isn't, it's impossible to do 100% effectively. For instance, Tess. He's put up a pretty obvious wall between them emotionally, but he trusts her, they have chemistry, he works with her every day, and if you asked him, he might say it's all in the interest of survival or their partnership is strictly professional. But the thing is, if you don't like or care about someone, it's unlikely you trust them very much either. Trust is something you only afford to people you think are deserving of it. So the more of it that someone earns from you, the more likely you are to connect with them on a personal level. That being said, take a look at his reaction to her getting bitten.
Oh, Christ.
He reacts like I would if I came home and realized I'd left the stove on all day. He's shocked and maybe even angry at her for allowing this to happen, but he hides any pain he's feeling in that moment with that reaction. And in his mind, as long as he doesn't ever think or talk about it, her death can only hurt him so much.
About Tess, I don't even know what
Here's how this thing's gonna play out. You don't bring up Tess. Ever.
The emotional distance he's kept from Tess has sort of paid off here, but now he's thrusted into a scenario in which he has to be responsible for, provide for, and protect this child with his life. A child who has some rather striking similarities to his late daughter. If there was ever a kind of relationship in which his usual strategy of emotional isolation was going to fail, it was this one. Because hypothetically, if you replace Ellie with Sarah at this point in the story, he might have a different relationship with her. He might talk to her a little bit differently and be a little bit gentler, but how he'd behave, the dynamic between them and how fiercely he'd need to protect her would largely be the same. So with Ellie, the parallels this situation has to painful memories of once being a dad were obvious. How could he not think of Sarah? And I think he pretty quickly recognises just how vulnerable Ellie is likely to make him feel. So how does he combat this? He doubles down, of course, dialing up the asshole factor and all around being an unfair and abrasive dick.
And you just hang back like I told you to.
Well, you're glad I didn't, right?
I'm glad I didn't get my head blown off by a goddamn kid.
You know what? No. How about, hey, Ellie, I know it wasn't easy, but it was either him or me. Thanks for saving my ass. You got anything like that for me, Joel?
We gotta get going.
Lead the way.
If he can get Ellie not to like him, if he can maintain a sort of disgruntled relationship, then maybe he can get the job done without feeling so vulnerable. But that's a tough shtick to maintain because he has a conscience, even if it is a little selective. He knows it's not Ellie's fault that she happens to remind him of Sarah, and he knows she doesn't deserve to have to put up with his bullshit, which is why I think he often walks a lot of this stuff back.
Just so we're clear about back there, it was either him or me.
But for Ellie, it doesn't really matter how much of a dropkick Joel decides to be, the parental-like dynamic is obvious to her as well, which, being an orphan, is something she would have scarcely ever experienced. The hostility of the world that Ellie has grown up in and the lack of parental figures she's had within it has forced her to mature quickly, and while she is capable and independent, being a kid in the post-apocalypse is still fucking scary. She says that her greatest fear is just being alone. Just having someone in her life that she knows will protect her might make a world like this feel a little less dark and bleak. But so far, her issue has been that nobody in her life has stayed in it long enough to give her that sense of security, either by abandoning her or simply just being outlived by her. Loneliness is tragically what has characterized her life so far. So even if Joel's an asshole, for the time being, he's fulfilling the role she needs him to and giving her that security. Also, being that Joel had a life before the outbreak, he has a lot of the answers to questions she has about what the world was like back then, especially as they navigate through what's left of it together. For her, it's like a museum. Every new place or landmark they come across is exciting. Did you ever stay in a hotel like this? Did you go to coffee shops a lot? What the hell is an ice cream truck? Why are all these pages stuck together? Okay, that one doesn't count, but these questions are innocent and harmless enough that they don't elicit any painful memories for Joel, but they do force him to think about his life before the outbreak, gradually opening the door for him to become more open and vulnerable with Ellie, and even later on with Henry and Sam. And speaking of those questions, I think this is another area in which the game really excels. In a show or movie, world building is something you have to include very deliberately and is limited to only being able to showcase what the filmmakers want you to see. But a game has the advantage of being able to drop you in a 3D environment that you can explore and interact with yourself. The world is littered with environmental storytelling around every corner, and how curious you choose to be within this environment is entirely up to you. But Ellie's questions and observations do encourage you to stop and take notice of things that you otherwise might not have. And it allows for more spontaneous and natural dialogue that help flesh out Joel and Ellie's personalities and backstories in a way that the show just wasn't able to take advantage of. And the teamwork they demonstrate during the gameplay sequences, the ways in which they are forced to collaborate, problem solve, and survive dangerous situations naturally builds trust and rapport. And all of it contributes to how organically their relationship is slowly developed.
Whoa, look. Fireflies. I mean, real fireflies.
Yeah, I see that.
And it's interesting to watch how Joel's values evolve as his relationship with Ellie does. His responsibility to protect Ellie from physical danger was part of the mission from the start, but as he gets to know Ellie more personally, that responsibility seems to broaden quite dramatically. Ellie isn't calloused or jaded like Joel, or everyone else is for that matter. She's a kid, and kids have a right to push buttons or to ask a few too many questions. They deserve to be excited and optimistic about things, to be curious and daring, and to have hobbies, interests, and fascinations, you know, to be a kid. And Ellie isn't necessarily that young, but her innocence and vibrance is still exceedingly, vanishingly rare in the world of The Last of Us. And Joel, having once been a parent, I think understands that that is worth protecting just as much as the cure for humanity. Her innocence should not be a casualty of this mission. And so, in the interest of that, he gradually becomes more thoughtful, collecting comic books he thinks she'll like, humoring her questions, giving her high fives, and listening to her terrible jokes. And her optimism is infectious, because it's very difficult to be a grumpy old dick when the only person you're traveling with refuses to match that energy. So Joel begins to brighten up, which makes sense. Ellie is such a profoundly likable and endearing character that you have to try really hard not to fall in love with her, and so there's only so much Joel can do to resist caring in the way that he inevitably does. Having Ellie in his company brings out a warmth in him that he likely hasn't shown in 20 years. Rather than being an empty husk of a man just waiting to die, life with Ellie actually makes it worth living again.
What the hell? Shit, he's turning! That's my fucking brother! Screw it!
Shit!
Ellie? Ellie, are you alright?
Oh my god.
Sam?
Oh no.
Sam? Henry? Ellie, stay there. Henry? What have you done? I'm gonna get that gun from you, okay? Oh, okay, easy.
It's your fault.
This is nobody's fault, Henry.
It's all your fault.
Henry! Henry, no!
Oh my God.
It's a brutal scene. At a point when Joel is just beginning to open up and let someone into his heart, he's reminded just how easily people can die, how easily you can lose someone you care about. Because Henry and Sam's deaths aren't the result of some kind of evil or malice. It wasn't any one person in particular's intention or fault, it was just bad luck. And Henry's response to having to kill his own brother gives us and Joel a harrowing insight into how he might react if put in the same position with Ellie. Despite all his effort to avoid it, he cares about Ellie enough that feeling this kind of pain again is now a very real and petrifying possibility and something he just isn't willing to risk. The paralytic-like consequences of deep-rooted PTSD all bubbling to the surface. And so when they reach Tommy's, he chooses to abandon Ellie, to hand over the responsibility to his brother and return to being that husk of a man he was for so many years. This is the #1 narrative difference in the game that I prefer over HBO's version, because in the show, Joel's relationship with Ellie has developed his conscience in a way that's made him a more emotionally open person, but a less effective killer. And it's gotten to the point that he genuinely and not unreasonably doubts his ability to protect her, which has heightened his fear of losing her. But I feel that's an added variable that's against the point that's made in this version of the story. Because Joel is wrong to do this to Ellie. He's wrong to abandon her. He's come this far and he's still the best man for the job. He made a promise to Tess. He's the only person that Ellie trusts, and he is no less deadly than when he started. The only reason he doesn't want to continue is just because he's too afraid to. And I think it works so much better as a truth he struggles to admit to himself, let alone something he openly shares with Tommy, as good as Pedro Pascal's monologue was. And I think the idea that Tommy is better equipped for the job, that he's a former Firefly and knows how to better navigate the terrain, I think Joel genuinely believes that he's convinced himself of this bullshit excuse to justify why leaving Ellie is the right thing to do, that it's what's best for her if only she could see it that way.
Is this really all they had to worry about? Boys, movies, deciding which shirt goes with which skirt. It's bizarre.
Get up. We're leaving. Come on.
And if I say no?
Do you even realize what your life means? Huh? Running off like that, putting yourself at risk? It's pretty goddamn stupid.
Well, I guess we're both disappointed with each other then.
What do you want from me?
Admit that you wanted to get rid of me the whole time.
Tommy knows this area
Oh,
better
fuck
than...
that.
Well, I'm sorry. I trust him better than I trust myself.
Stop with the bullshit. What are you so afraid of? That I'm gonna end up like Sam? I can't get infected. I can take care of myself.
How many close calls have we had?
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
Ellie has always had the backbone to stand up to anyone she feels is out of line, but this is by far the most head-on she's ever taken an argument, and you can tell she's upset. She's visibly fighting back her tears, but she never loses her composure or says anything hurtful that she doesn't actually mean. I mentioned it earlier, but more than anything in the world, she's afraid of being alone, of being abandoned. And standing directly in the shadow of that happening to her, she doesn't blink. She instead has Joel completely figured out. She clocks every bullshit excuse the second it leaves his lips. She calls out that he's only doing this because he's afraid, and she recognizes that Sam's death was what caused this whole change of heart in the first place. And it leaves Joel flustered, frustrated, lost for words. So he turns his back as if to regroup and gather himself. Because she has a point. She's braver than he is, and he knows it.
Not her, you know.
What?
Ellie knows Joel well enough to know that mentioning Sarah won't be taken well, and he predictably reacts like she's just touched an infected wound. And Ellie follows up by saying that she's lost people too, that she understands. And I've never felt exactly what Joel feels. I've never lost someone like that. But I sure as shit can only imagine. And I do know that in a broader sense, people suffering from any kind of mental health issue often feel lonely. Like nobody in the world can possibly understand what they're going through, that nobody has ever felt as badly as they do. And I think Joel naturally sees Ellie's youth and bubbly personality and thinks, how could she understand? She has no idea what loss really feels like. But Ellie has lost everyone. And sure, she's never lost someone quite like Joel has lost Sarah, but she's never had someone like Sarah to lose. It's all she wants, just to have one lasting relationship that really matters. And she's just starting to get that from Joel, and now he plans to rip that away from her for no other reason than just because he's scared, and he's not even brave enough to admit it. She does. She heartbreakingly does. And yet he responds, "You're not my daughter, and I sure as hell ain't your dad." What a horrible thing to say to a child begging you, crying for you not to leave them. It is cold-blooded. But again, I think it's more of a declaration to himself than it is to Ellie. One last effort to convince himself why he's not responsible for her, why she shouldn't matter to him. But Ellie has laid down some hard truths that are difficult to ignore. And I think being challenged so directly forces him to open his eyes to see the whole situation a bit more clearly. He is being selfish, and it's breaking her heart. This is not a responsibility you can just handball off to someone else. And this doesn't even need to be about the cure for humanity for it to still be bigger than he is. It's not about you. It's about doing right by a kid who deserves better than to be abandoned. Who, after everyone she's lost, deserves to have someone she trusts actually stay by her side. And in just one shot, without one line of dialogue, we see Joel realize all of that. This moment is the turning point at which he decides for the first time in 20 years to just let it happen. To let himself just be a human being again, because he sees just how selfish it is not to be. And it's staggering just how much pressure this change almost instantly alleviates. It immediately becomes clear that Joel denying himself of close relationships is precisely the reason that that infected wound I mentioned earlier was never able to heal. In choosing to do right by Ellie, without even realizing it, he's inadvertently done right by himself. It's after this point that he actually feels strong enough to tell Ellie about Sarah more openly. That picture of him and Sarah is not nearly as painful for him to hold. And it's not magic, he's not fixed all of a sudden, definitely not, but grieving is a whole lot easier when what you've lost isn't everything you have. It's only easier now because he's finally accepted that he has Ellie. It's why this moment feels so earned. We've seen the walls gradually come down in the subtlest of ways, and at no point throughout the entire course of the story has there been a single line from Joel, even alluding to the way that he feels, and yet the path to where he is now has still been laid out so clearly. He is a radically transformed character from the beginning of the game to the end, and not a single moment in that transformation ever felt abrupt or contrived to me. The Last of Us is a masterclass in just how much character development, emotion, and information you can compact into so little dialogue, and how to use every tool at your medium's disposal in order to tell a terrific story. So why The Last of Us worked for me is because the development of Joel and Ellie's relationship is just perfect. I said at the beginning that before I started the game, I adjusted my expectations, that I wouldn't go in so skeptically and I'd give the game a fairer shot. And to be honest, I lied. All I've heard about for the last 12 years is the masterpiece that is The Last of Us. I just couldn't help it. How could I possibly go in without unbelievably high expectations? If it was anything less than perfect, I'd have been disappointed. It was unfortunately the exact same attitude I had with the show, but now having played the game, seeing the 10 out of 10 scores and the declarations of it being a masterpiece, it doesn't confuse me. Instead, I think my response is to nod and say,
Okay.